There are examples in Seattle's past where we have voted down civic projects that, looking back, you're like, what? Really? So there are three great examples of this. What if? Like, what if we'd done these projects? So the first project is known as the Bogue Plan. Virgil Bogue was the city planner, and after the 1909 Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition, there was a desire to make Seattle a little more classical and a little less frontier. It would have built a big civic center in what's now Belltown, a railroad tunnel from Seattle to the east side, turning Mercer Island into a public park. And the whole thing had this kind of Venice or Paris, this kind of classical European look. We still talk about today, well, Seattle should be more like European cities. Well, that plan was put before the voters in 1912, and we said no. So the second topic I want to talk about is a series of bond issues called Forward Thrust. After the Seattle World's Fair in 1962, civic leaders thought, hey, we're going to be a big 21st century city. Maybe it would be good if we planned for that. They were looking at rapid transit, cleaning up some of the waterways and some of the pollution, expanding open space and parks, building a multi-purpose stadium. People didn't have to vote for the whole package. You could vote for the ones that you like. We cleaned up Lake Washington, we got more parks, but the rapid transit provision, it passed by just over 50% of the vote, about 51% of the vote, but it lost because all the ballot measures needed 60% of the vote to go into effect. It went back on the ballot in 1970. Voters voted it down again, even though the federal government would have paid 2/3 of the cost of this new system. I think a lot of people look back and think, ooh, what were they thinking? So the last thing I want to talk about is called the Seattle Commons. In the 1990s, South Lake Union was a low-rise warehouse district. Paul Allen owned a lot of property there. People were eyeing it for tech-oriented development. Back then it was biotech and cell phone companies.
Standards for the way you live in the 90s.
A columnist for the Seattle Times, John Hinterberger, came up with an idea and said, well, if we're going to develop this neighborhood for all these companies, why don't we build a central park? A committee was put together. Paul Allen said, well, I'll loan $20 million to acquire property for this park. The opposition didn't like the idea of tax money going to support a neighborhood for rich techies, a techie ghetto, people called it. The Commons was voted down. There was no central park. All the development that was planned happened anyway, and in fact more of it because there was more land to build on. What do you make of three great projects getting shot down, all three of them a little ahead of their time? I think Seattleites are kind of skeptical of authority. Really, we're going to spend that amount of money on this public project, and who's going to benefit? My parents were supporters of Forward Thrust. I mean, they especially wanted Lake Washington cleaned up. I am old enough to remember when raw sewage would float by, at the beach. It's not a good situation.